and welcome to VistaTalks, interesting discussions with interesting people from all around the world. I'm your host for today, Priscillia Charles, and today I'm joined in studio by not only one, two, but three special guests for a special episode of VistaTalks for International Women's Day. Welcome, Paula, Dominika, and Monika. We're delighted to have you today.
Thanks.
Good to be here. Thank you for having us.
Well, thanks to you all. For those of you who wouldn't know Paula, Monika, and Dominika, Dominika is a strategic accounts at Vistatec. Paula Manzur is machine translation specialist, and Monika Bugiel is language services manager at Vistatec. So without further ado, we're going to get started and get to know you a little bit, and then discuss, important topics in relation to International Women's Day. So first, can you tell us maybe a little bit about yourselves, your background and your career up to date? So the three of you work for Vistatec, and I'm really curious.
Mm-hmm. Sure, I can start.
Go ahead, Paula.
I'm Paula Manzur, and as you said, I'm working as a machine translation specialist at Vistatec. And it's a very exciting role because I have the opportunity to implement machine translation solutions across the board and work with many different teams. So I'm always learning. And well, that's my profession, but my vocation is translation. I'm a translator, and I've also worked as a localization project manager in the past. So I say that I'm able to wear many hats, and that helps me keep an open mind. So I can say that from experience, if you combine your occupation with your vocation, you get your passion. And my passion is language technology, for sure, which I've discovered like 4 or 5 years ago. So I'm happy I found it. I'm happy to be working at Vistatec.
That sounds great. Thanks, Paula. What about you, Dominika?
Yeah, so I joined Vistatec in 2019 and joined as a strategic accounts director. And it's also a role that I really enjoy because it allows me to basically connect with a lot of people, a lot of our customers and prospects who are looking for localization solutions. And kind of every day is a new adventure, and every day is a new conversation with someone interesting. And I think the localization industry has a lot of very interesting people. So that's what I enjoyed most. Like Paula, my background is actually in translation as well. So I used to be a translator. I used to also pursue my kind of academic career and doing PhD. Actually about Argentinian playwrights. So there's another connection to Paula, to where Paula is. And then one day I spotted an ad in a newspaper that was about a project manager in localization. And I didn't exactly know what it was, but I decided to apply for it to kind of break, a little bit the monotony of working at an university and always by my own desk as a translator. And that's how I ended up in the localization industry and went through translation, project management to sales and account management. So very excited to be here.
Thanks, Dominika. And what about you, Monika?
I joined Vistatec less than a year ago amidst the pandemic, so it was quite an experience. I started just like the two ladies as a translator years ago, and at some point I noticed again an ad about an open position for a localization project manager. I thought it would be great for a summer job, a part-time role, but look at me, almost 20 years later, and I'm still here.
So it was destiny.
Yes, sort of. And I was lucky because I was exposed to a number of different roles within the industry. I started as a project manager. I already had a good background as a translator / editor. I did a bit of technical work, such as bug fixing or even the TP. a fair share amount of time spent in supply chain management. And lastly, in quality management. And as cliche as it may sound in this industry, language is still my passion after so many years. I have recently started learning Spanish, and it's quite enjoyable.
That's fantastic. Well, that's what it is to be passionate about languages, I suppose. Well, for myself, I work in marketing, but I've also been passionate about languages from the start, which probably encouraged me to move abroad, being French and loving English, speaking English, working in English all the time. And I also studied languages, which I don't know, something I don't necessarily talk about as often as I should. English, Spanish, and a little bit of Russian as well, that I gave up a bit. But yeah, so here we are. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about the International Women's Day, which we know is happening next Monday on the 8th of March. And obviously it's a fantastic opportunity to celebrate women all around the world. So this year the theme is Choose to Challenge, with a new pose being the hand raising. And why is because exactly, Paula, the idea is really to choose to challenge and calling out gender bias as inequality. So I'd like to get your thoughts a little bit about what do you think about this particular theme and the importance, you know, what does this day mean to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I saw that this year's theme was Choose to Challenge, I really liked it. First of all, I think it has a really good potential as a social media campaign and kind of allows people, you know, to show the hand, strike a pose. It's a kind of a power pose because it means that, first of all, you choose not to be silent. You choose to speak up. You choose to call out certain things or biases that you see around yourself. And also the idea of, you know, challenging the status quo and kind of going more towards gender equality. I think it all kind of adds up. And when I was thinking about it, I kind of thought about the thing that perhaps we as all women sometimes do based on our, I don't know, education, history, and it's this self-silencing. I don't know if you experienced that while kind of learning new, for example, a foreign language. But I was one of these people who, for example, when I learned French, I was kind of scared or awkward in speaking out in the beginning. I thought that first I have to, you know, speak perfectly, not make any mistakes. And only then I can kind of, you know, raise my hand and say, you know, this perfect sentence. While then I observe other people, and sometimes they were boys, you know, who just didn't care whether they made any mistakes. They just talked, and it made them kind of learn much faster as well, and gain kind of more confidence as they went. So I think that's something that we have to remember about also now, kind of in our current jobs, to always don't think that we need a master thesis, several publications and articles to speak, you know, because as women, I think we have this strive towards perfection. But just speak our truth and make sure that we are present at meetings and so on.
Absolutely. And not be shy. I think that's a very common thread. What you just said about boys being brave and not being scared about making a mistake. Sometimes we, as you know, women, we are holding back because we're shy, we're modest, we're humble. This is what we are still often told by our parents, by the society, and it's. Some of us may find it difficult to speak up, to raise a hand, ask a very good, a very pertinent, yet maybe a little bit uncomfortable question, and call something out. So I find this initiative to choose to challenge a very much needed one.
Yeah, I agree with the ladies. I was thinking about why is it a challenge, right, to call out For example, I don't know, gender bias and gender inequality. I was thinking about all that. And I was thinking that is a challenge because it has become kind of normal, these kinds of behaviors. So I have to relate it to my work and to it is gender bias to the extent that, for example, machine translation engines, they choose either masculine or feminine gender for some job positions on languages that do require a grammatical inflection, for gender. So for example, I haven't tried this for a while actually, but Google Translate public version used to translate the word nurse into Spanish always as a female. And just assuming that all nurses are female, right? And this is because the engines use internet data to learn. And who uses the internet? The people, the society. So what more proof do we need that there is gender bias in society, and empty engines are mathematics, they are algorithms. So the change needs to come from society. So calling out these behaviors, I consider them a challenge, but it's the first step towards making a change.
Absolutely, yeah.
No, that's super interesting what you're saying, Paula. I was thinking about that also in the context, of our industry. And yeah, first of all, NMT kind of, engines, but also now I think there is a lot of talk about AI bias, also gender bias, because we basically see, and I think there was a really good example a couple of years ago with Amazon. So Amazon was trying to create this engine, which was, a machine learning tool that would make the recruitment process faster and basically being able to kind of pre-select the candidates for jobs, and then, only a selected few would go to an further recruitment process and interview stages. And what they discovered is that, they fed to the engine the data from the last, I think, 10 years of profiles and successful resumes and so on. And suddenly they discovered that the engine was biased against women, because basically it took all the historical data where usually the male candidates were more successful in getting certain jobs. And the engine basically identified the word women, like women's clubs, for example. I don't know, you went to a women's school, or you are in women in localization, or you were the captain of a women's chess team at school. And it identified you as a less preferable candidate. So it's interesting because in the end, artificial intelligence is what we feed it with. It's all the historical data. I think there is this saying in our industry, garbage in, garbage out. So in a way, the engine got biased against women. And actually, I think the Amazon makers couldn't even fix that. They were trying to input different data, but in the end, they had to scrap the whole project and start again with better data from the outset. So yeah, it's very interesting, Paula, what you said about NMT as well.
Oh, that's I had no idea. That's very well in I suppose not a good way, but it is very interesting to see the implication of AI machine translation in that sense, and the and also in general language-wise the evolution of and the perception of some professions, such as we talk about nurses, or for instance, how actors, an actor, I know, for instance, in French, the difference, there's a really important difference in genders in terms of words, and sometimes the negative connotation depending on the gender used and the words. But so I wanted to move on to gender equality that you mentioned. Obviously, in all around the world, in some, whether it's different industries, it remains an issue, and in some companies. So how important is it, in your opinion? We mentioned it's obviously one of the topics that we want to choose to challenge on March the 8th.
Yeah, I think back in 2020 was the last gender gap report that they published. And I think the findings were that we still have about 100 years until we reach gender equality in our society, which seems incredible. But even if you look at the, I don't know, Fortune 500 companies and how many female CEOs we have. So we broke a record last year. So in May, it was published that we have 37 female CEOs. So I think a little over 7%, but it still feels, I think, a weird number to say in the 21st century.
Yeah, way insufficient. I agree with Domi. And speaking to our previous topic of conversation, in Polish, for instance, we do not even have female profession names for some professions. Like it is automatically assumed that a president, a vice president, basically all of those high-ranked governmental positions are for males only. And you can create a female form, but it does not really sound very professional. It has this funny tone to it. It's just how the language works. And we need to remember that language is one of the most powerful tools, right? If you translate a text or if you write a text, and it's in a language like Spanish, and Paula can speak to that, I'm sure, or in Polish, you need to be either impersonal, or if you want to make it more impactful, you address the target audience directly. And in those languages, you need to pick the gender of the person. For me, as a woman, it's highly offensive if someone is trying to advertise something or sell something and they use the male form. And according to many researchers done in the past, if you have a girl or a woman just trying to evaluate different options, and the input, the things, the data that they need to consider, it's all written as if men were the preferred option, they are less likely to consider this, which is, I think, why in the long run we have fewer women in technical schools working a slightly bit technical jobs, just because they are intimidated by the language that is used.
Interesting. Do you find this in the technical in technical roles, Paula? What is your view on this?
Yeah, I think that the language and how we call things is just a reflection of who we are, really. So to be honest, now there's a lot of movement, and there are actions to change the Spanish language, actually to remove the letter O from many words. That the letter O is associated with masculine gender. So yeah, we hope that there are changes coming in that aspect, because yeah, there is a difference, and you can feel excluded really from many of the Spanish words. What I can add to this gender equality topic is that I think it's important not to deny it, because I feel that people still, there are people that still deny that this happens or that this is an issue. And if we can still say, or have this feeling that, this happens because of my gender, then it means that it still happens, it's still within society. And I know that, for example, gender equality is one of the United Nations goals. So it's not our imagination, it is there. So it's important not to deny that it happens.
Absolutely, yeah. And I want to talk about, we're talking about gender equality. So what is the ultimate question? What does feminism mean to you? We're talking about the importance of gender equality and the goals, as you mentioned, that United Nations has, which obviously means, you know, that is something that it's on everyone's agenda. And there's always this debate, if I may say, of, you know, of people saying, am I a feminist or not? Including, you know, and men being asked the questions, are you a feminist? So what do you think?
Mm-hmm. To me, I think it's simple. If you stand for equality, then you're basically a feminist. And I think that we went through, you know, a lot of waves of feminism and a lot of theories and a lot of kind of philosophy behind that. But in the end, to me, it's about freedom, liberation, equality, and standing for yourself. And perhaps as a recommendation to our listeners, which I think will be relevant here when talking about feminism, but also about the power of words that we spoke about just previously, a good recommendation would be All Things Global webcast with Al Via Merello. Al is a senior global language services manager at Nike, and we had a really good conversation with him about you know, how words can contribute to tyranny, and a certain use of words can cause havoc and kind of just perpetuate certain stereotypes that we have about gender as well. So just a recommendation for our listeners.
Thanks. No, that's very useful, and I know it was a very interesting, very popular episode, and another one to come very soon. Did you want to add something, Paula? I'm sorry, maybe.
Yeah, no, the fact that to me, like I'm asked that question of, are you a feminist or are you not? I'm usually not a person that likes labels. So this question is a little bit hard to me because I'm still inspecting a lot of things in my inner self, let's say, related to feminism. And I still have a lot to learn, especially about history, feminism history. And there are a lot of current views and ways, as Domi said. But I was thinking about this, and to me, personally, feminism is like this voice, a voice that is always there, you know, and that it may start very low and soft, but it may get louder, and that it has this kind of tone and this tempo that is speeding up and is asking us to keep up and to listen. So I think that I can hear that voice very clearly, but not only the voice, but the resonance that it has. So it may sound like very poetic. I'm a translator, I'm a linguist. I have to think that this way. It may sound poetic, but it's just how I feel about it, in the fact that it's always with me and that is a part of me.
I think that feminism is simply a tool that hopefully one day will get us to a place where we are no longer talking about women's rights, but about people's rights. And think that not so long ago, the society was livid about women wanting to have the right to vote or to wear trousers or to ride a bike. And all of this is pretty much the standard right now. So hopefully in less than 100 years, it will be a standard that we get the same salary for exactly the same job, for instance, and everything else would also be on par. So we would be talking about human rights instead of just women's rights.
Absolutely, yeah, no. A good example, you just mentioned something, for instance, wearing pants, trousers. In France a few years ago, only maybe in the last 5 or so 10 years, was a law from the 18th century preventing women from wearing trousers abolished. Only that dated back from the Napoleon era, which demonstrates, you know, how like incredible, like I mean, incredible in a way that this hasn't been changed, up until now. And so, yeah, it is a crazy example in a way that demonstrates sometimes, how much we have to work, to move forward and to change and to challenge gender bias and gender equality. So now I want to move back a little bit about the legalization industry. Obviously, there's different conferences and organizations that support women, and one of them being Women in Localization, that a lot of our listeners would be familiar with. Fantastic example of how to foster a global community for the advancements of women in the localization industry through networking, education, events, career advancement, mentoring, but really a recognition of women's accomplishment. So the organization is supported by thousands of women all around the globe and by local chapters who support members locally. So I know that you're all familiar with the organization. In your opinion, how important is it to offer a platform such as this one, or, for instance, Women in Tech, which is a really famous conference for women all around the world every year?
It provides a sense of solidarity. You're not alone. We have your back and we can share best practices, we can collaborate, and we can communicate and inspire each other. So every organization like this one has a certain role, and yeah, all hands on board. And I think they are playing an important role in the industry and also for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with Monika and what you said, Priscillia, that I think it's important to find a place and to find other women who are, in your industry in different roles, have kind of an outlook from different perspectives on their career and how they are progressing, and highly recommend to get in touch with Women in Localization for example, their mentoring program. You can become a mentor, or you can be, the mentoree as well. So I think the networking, cheering each other up, and also meeting other women who are kind of in the industry is very important.
Thanks, Dominika. And so now I want to talk about celebrating women's achievement in general. We talked about obviously the importance of celebrating International Women's Day. On top of your head, what would you say would be interesting, or any new ideas that could help, raising awareness, of some of the issues that women face, or or just to help celebrate women's achievements on an everyday basis in a better way?
Well, I'm not sure if this is a kind of celebration of achievements, of women's achievements, but Domi just mentioned the mentorship program. And I think mentorship is a very good idea. It's a way of supporting each other, supporting women that have a potential and that can really make an impact in that self-silence that we were talking about at the beginning. So that we have these spaces and platforms that we are able to speak up and practice that we can incorporate it naturally into our lives. So I think it's a good way to support growth, women's growth that can lead to those achievements. It will be like a kind of celebration, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I was also thinking about, I'm always very curious about those companies who have female CEOs, and I always want to learn about their, leadership style. What do they do on a daily basis? How do they manage their teams? And yeah, so to me, it's also inspiring to read those stories. And I don't know, for example, we all know about the glass ceiling concept and, women breaking through certain boundaries and those stereotypes. But there's also a concept of glass cliff, where whenever there is a huge crisis in a company, none of the men actually, you know, applies for the big job of the CEO. It's usually a woman that is kind of thrown out into the deep water to kind of salvage the situation. There are, I think, psychological studies about that. And it's interesting to me, for example, looking at the examples of, so there is Mari Barra, who is the CEO of General Motors. So kind of a very masculine world and company that employs definitely more men than women. And to look, for example, at the situation that she was faced with, I think right where, when she became the CEO, she had that huge recall where there was a faulty ignition in the cars. And basically there were, you know, some deaths involved, some personal injuries, huge kind of, I think 30 million cars were recalled from the market. So she had basically, you know, an incredible crisis on her hands immediately. And how she kind of chose to lead the company through it. And it was through kind of transparency, talking about things that nobody talked about previously and in the open, and about the efforts of what, you know, the company can do and how to involve the employees. She, for example, started, I think, a helpline for employees, or just like a, you know, a call service where they could alert the company if they see that some procedures are not maybe fully compliant with the safety requirements and so on, so that, you know, even the lowest employee can say, hey, something is not working right there. Maybe we could, you know, look at it now so we avoid the problems in the future, because, you know, she discovered that there was simply not that feedback from one level of management to the other. So I don't know, I always get inspired by those stories. And I think the first story about her was that when she was still, I think, a director of HR at GM, they had like this 10-page book of dress codes for men and women. And since she always wants to simplify things and, you know, make things less rigid and more flexible for employees to work, she replaced these 10 pages with just one sentence. The employees are required to dress appropriately. And it kind of shifted the whole company perspective, you know, nobody was talking about women having to wear, I don't know, pantsuits and so on. It just, you know, it was just a matter of talking to your manager and thinking, oh, today I can wear jeans, but tomorrow we have a customer meeting, so I can dress in a different way. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I hadn't heard this example, but yeah, it's a great way of women leadership and initiative. Fantastic. And so, like, what would you say in the future, if you had to think about steps to ensure, we're talking about challenging, you know, gender balance in society and creating a better inclusive world in society, what would you like to see yourself in the future?
Just to stir the pot, and I would like to ask this question to Paula and Monika. What do you think about gender quotas in politics, in I don't know, in companies?
Well, it's an interesting concept, right? On one hand, it encourages and enables a woman to participate. On the other hand, there are critics who say it's only because of their gender they get there, not because of their skills and know-how. I think the quota might be very much needed at the start, but with time, people will start appreciating the value that women add to organizations, to politics. And it won't be an issue anymore because they will already have earned their place there.
Yeah, I totally agree, Monika. I mean, might be kind of a dramatic decision at the beginning, but I think that eventually it will be normal. Like, we need to do this in order to change things, and maybe more women will be able to participate in politics. And so yeah, it's a heated topic over here in Argentina. So I'm not going to say anything else.
Yeah.
I think
it's mm-hmm. Go ahead, Monika.
No, I was just thinking that we need this kind of a balance at all places. Men and women have different leadership styles, different ideas, and they get there using different tools. They choose different routes. And while men, that's a stereotype, of course, but let me refer to it. Men are usually more daring, more willing to take a risk, and they have a clear goal ahead of them, while women are maybe less, they have a cooler head, so they need to weigh all pros and cons. They usually are more conscious of their environment as well, which in a company that is as good as their employees here are, it's not a bad thing, right? So we need to have both genders at all places, because they will provide all the inputs. They will look at things from different standpoints, and this is all complementary. It's not contradictory. And if you weigh more on one edge, like you weigh towards risk and everything, you might end up in a situation that is not good for the company, for the organization, for the country. And this is where we get to this glass cliff, Domi, that you talked about.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. And yeah, I agree with both of you. I think the gender quotas are controversial, and there is there is this initial repulsion because it is a form of, I guess, sexism in order to introduce change. I guess it's just means to a goal, because of course in an ideal world we would love to, the candidates to be selected based on their qualifications, skills, intelligence, character, and not based on their gender. And the quotas basically pick women, right, based on their gender. But I think what convinced me back in the day were some studies that were made in India back in, I think, 1990s. And basically they introduced a quota for like small rural governments to have, I think, 40 or 50% women. So before they introduced a quota for a limited time. So there was only like 8 years, I think. So when they started, it turned out that I think 4% of women were elected to those local governments. After 8 years, and when nobody was forced, to pick women, it was 40%. And also what shifted, I think, based on this research, is that it was not only that suddenly people accepted that women could be, elected and could represent them, but also the shift was in the parents and what they wanted for their children. So in the past, the parents of boys, wanted them to go to a university and become a doctor or a lawyer, and then come back home and get married, find a good wife. The children of girls, wanted them to basically marry a lawyer or a doctor and be happy and stay in the village. And after kind of this experiment, it turned out that suddenly the parents wanted the same for their for their daughters, to just go to a university, study, get a good profession, and and it all shifted. So that's definitely something that convinced me to the gender quotas.
It's about opening certain doors, right?
Yeah.
That can be closed. because of the way the society has been working for a while. Think about those trousers and riding bicycles in the past. So in that respect, I'm also in favor of the solution.
Well, thank you. And is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience today in honor of International Women's Day, or any thoughts to leave the audience on, any quotes, anything that comes to mind to finish this interview?
I would say only to raise your voice.
Well said. And choose to challenge.
Yeah, choose to challenge.
Yes. Exactly. And maybe just to pay attention to the language. I mean, since it's a conversation between language professionals, and I think Monika referred to that, you know, that we kind of perceive women and men under different labels, and we kind of find certain qualities in men and women that are different. And sometimes we also use a very different language for men and women. So basically, I think there were also studies that if a woman is ambitious, then you would call her, you know, power hungry, and kind of, you know, the negative connotations, instead of a man who would be called driven and reliable and kind of, you know, chasing his dreams and so on. The same with anger. You know, when a man is angry, it's usually because there is a reason behind it, and he is raising his voice for social injustice. When a woman is angry, it's usually, you know, we say, oh, it's just her temperament, she's hormonal, or she's overreacting instead of reacting. So it seems like women always have to give a reason for our emotions, you know, and our anger. So just to pay attention to that in your daily life, because I think it's very visible in our society, and just to call it out when you see it.
Thanks, Dominika. What about you, Monika? Any thoughts before we go?
We are stronger than we think, and we can do more that many people think we can do. So let's embrace that.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much to the three of you. It was a fantastic discussion, and I'm excited already to be able to share with our audience in honor of International Women's Day taking place on March the 8th, and with this year's theme, Choose to Challenge. So thank you again. So it's already the end of today's show with Dominika D'Agostino, Paula, Manzur, and Monika Bugiel. So please make sure to tune in again to listen or watch our next VistaTalks episode, where we'll be discussing a more interesting topic with interesting people from all around the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Priscillia.
Bye.